Hey, welcome back to Mornings with Your Mayor. I'm your host, Mayor Robert C. Dye. We're back with another inside look into what's happening in Farmers Branch. And as you know, we're kind of in the throes of some of the most interesting times that we've seen in the last 100 years. And on the forefront right now is the social unrest and rights movement taking place, not only in our community, but across the country. And there's a lot of angst and concern as we look to move forward towards a better future. But first, we all need to listen, educate ourselves, and then look to make a positive change from that. And in that endeavor, our guest today for episode 12 is Richard Miles. I first met Richard at our Public Safety Day at Leadership Metro Crest, and Richard spoke about how he was wrongfully incarcerated and the path that he took to achieve his freedom, and now the work that he does to help others through similar situations. And so I just want to say, Richard, thanks for taking the time this morning to speak with me. How's everything going?
Everything is good. Thank you for this opportunity, Robert. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Well, appreciate you. I know you had to drop the daughters off this morning at daycare. So how's the wife and the two daughters of yours doing?
They are good. I don't know if you know, but December 1st was my second daughter. So I have a 7-month-old daughter and I have a 5-year-old daughter. So.
Wow. So that definitely makes this world a lot more interesting for you. Like how are you able to navigate through this time right now, just given not only what's going on outside of the home, but right there at home with the brand new daughter?
I have learned to follow assumed responsibilities. So my wife assumes certain responsibilities and I do those things. So she works at the house and I have a little bit more free time. So taking care of the girls and getting them off to school is cool. And I never would have thought I'd be in this position anyway. So any burden is bearable right now for me.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And I guess when you talk about, I guess, the situation you're in, just want to kind of dive into your background and how you got to where you are today, because it truly is an inspiring story of perseverance and success, and just the steps that you've taken, and not only from where you started, but the work that you're doing now and how you've been able to move forward just is so inspiring to me. And so would love to just share some of that story with the listeners, just get a little bit more background on you and where you are right now.
Yes, sir. So once again, Robert, I appreciate this opportunity. And my name is Richard Miles, and I am now the founder, president, and CEO of Miles of Freedom. And Miles of Freedom is a reentry focused organization, and we look at the individual returning home from prison, the family structure, and the community dynamics. I did not fall into this space by collegiate education or something like that. I was actually wrongfully incarcerated for 15 years at the age of 19. I grew up in Dallas, Texas, Oak Cliff. I oftentimes say that I was raised up in a very spiritually guided household. My dad found Jesus when we was very early, and he made sure we saw him and went to church with him pretty much every day out of the week. So that was my foundation. Going to school, I eventually went to Skyline because I'm from Dallas, and made it to high school and enjoyed that life. Probably about the age of 17, 18, I graduated and I was working at McDonald's. And I thought that it was time for me to kind of branch out on my own. My objective, however, was to go to TSTC in Waco to study plastics engineering. That was the vocation that I took at Skyline. I really loved it. It was kind of like before plastics had evolved as much as it is now. So going to Waco was kind of like in my future. Left home the summer of 1993 after graduation, and about a year later, May 15th, 1994, I remember the day before I was at the house. I stayed in North Dallas. I moved in with a good friend of mine, and I had a girlfriend that stayed in Oak Cliff, so I paid him to take me to Oak Cliff early that morning. I stayed over at Betty's house. She stayed in Robin Oaks Apartments, and a couple of my friends stayed behind the apartments, and it got pretty late, probably about 12:30 or 1 o'clock, and the buses had stopped running. And my friend Ernest, he had a girlfriend that stayed right around the corner from me in North Dallas. He was headed to see her, and I offered him $5 to drive me from Oak Cliff to North Dallas. Jumped in the car, I'm 19 years old. We drive, we stop at, there used to be a 7-Eleven on Inwood. I never forget, I bought me a pack of cigarettes, got in the car, left that 7-Eleven on Inwood, and we got to his girlfriend's house first. She stayed on the corner of University and Roper. Paid him the $5, got out the car, Robert, and it was the longest walk of my life. I remember walking up University, walking towards the Love Field Airport. I made a right in front of the Sewell Cadillac dealership shops, and Lemon actually curves off. It's a street called Bluffview. And on the corner of Lemon Avenue, Lover's Lane and Bluffview is a Red Coleman store. And this was back before cell phones had came out. And so I called my friend that night and told him, I said, hey man, I'm right here at the Red Coleman. Can you cut the alarm off? Because it was probably like 1:30, 2 o'clock now, pretty early in the morning. He answered across the street. There was a police car sitting idle right there. Didn't think anything about it. The next thing I heard was a helicopter, and the light shined this light on me. I didn't start running or anything because I hadn't did anything wrong. Police cars came from everywhere saying, get on the ground, lay on the ground. And at the age of 19, I was handcuffed, or at that point in time, I didn't know what I was arrested for. So they handcuffed me, put me in the police car, Robert, and I'm telling the police officers, I said, man, my friend just dropped me off. I don't know what's going on. He's right around the corner. We can go around there. They told me once I got downtown to tell the detective. They stopped at a Texaco in the process of taking me downtown. And when I got downtown, that's when I found out that I was arrested for murder and attempted murder. To this day, I still don't really know what happened. I only know from what I've heard in the trial, but I had no knowledge of somebody getting killed or shot that night. 30, what we learned during the journey was 30 minutes prior to me going or getting dropped off in North Dallas, a shooting had happened at a Texaco station by Bachman Lake. So it was a club over there. They let out, the car goes to the Texaco, and people are talking to the guys in the car, and somebody runs up on the car and shoots in the car and runs off. A white Cadillac comes to pick this person up. Then they drive off, and one of the witnesses jumps in his car and follows this Cadillac, right? The Cadillac drops a person off right by the Sewell Cadillac. The guy drives up, he makes a U-turn, passes back by the person, sees the guy, says that this is the shooter. He gets back to the Texaco, then tells the police officers where this person just got out. The time frame, now I'm getting dropped off. I'm walking up University. The dispatch is out. The description of the shooter was 6'2", 6'4", real dark complected, slim. Even with the time of chance of me walking, Robert, I didn't even fit the description, so I should not have ever been arrested. Yeah. And so that began a whole nother fight for my life right there. But that, I oftentimes say May 15th, 1994 was the day that Richard Ray Miles Jr. died. Who I dreamed to be and aspired to be, and who my parents didn't want me to be, was shifted by life.
Yeah, and that's an unfortunate, turn of events for, what seemed to be just a casual night with some friends and trying to get home. Yes. I couldn't even begin to imagine, what that situation might have been, because I can I can understand the idea that you're saying that was the night that Richard Miles Jr. died, because, you were planning to go off to Waco, study, plastics engineering and get into a whole new field. And now you're faced with a future that looks very different than what that might have been. And the confusion and, just uncertainty about how did I get in this situation, and why, or is, probably what you're describing to the officers or the detectives or your lawyers or your family or anyone at that time, trying to pinpoint and, prove that, hey, this isn't me. I wasn't even there. These timeframes don't add up. But what kind of happened from there? Because I know, once, and as you said, wrongfully incarcerated, which, leads me to believe they definitely found you guilty of the crime that you didn't commit. But from there, like, how were you able to, instead of have all this anger and frustration, which I'm sure you had at the beginning, morph that into what led you into the prospect of hope, and then for fighting, for your freedom during those next 15 years?
Yeah. So that night when I was arrested, I was able to. So before they took me to the detective station, they stopped at the Texaco, and it was at this Texaco where they conducted a gunshot residue test on my hand to see if I had shot a gun. But also in the process, there were 10 witnesses that all signed affidavits and saw the shooter and gave a description of the shooter. 9 of the witnesses were located in front of the Texaco. One witness, for some reason, was behind the Texaco when I was taken to the Texaco to do this gunshot residue test. This was the only witness that pointed me out in the photographic lineup during the interrogation with the police officers. I don't think the detectives or officers took into consideration the other 9 did not see me in custody. And so his identification of me was not because I committed a crime, but because of the one-on-one tainted identification process that had occurred at that point in time. Fast forward a couple of hours, I'm sitting with the detective, Robert, and I gave the detective the phone number of James, that's who I stayed with in North Dallas. Betty, that was my girlfriend. Ernest drove me from Oak Cliff to North Dallas. Carla was his girlfriend, and Ernest's mom. The detective called all of these people, man. I stayed in the waiting holdover room for about 4 or 5 hours. He came back and said, man, your story checked out, but we have a witness that said they saw you kill one person and shoot another person, and you're going to be arraigned for murder and attempted murder. So I'm ushered from capers, which was crimes against persons, to Lucerne County Jail, assessed at $350,000 bond. The first phone call that I made was to my mom to tell her that I was incarcerated. And one of the things that she said, it really stuck with me. And basically it was, she knew that I was innocent. And it was that encouragement to know that somebody believed in you. It in essence gave me the opportunity and the capacity to push forth and fight. My dad was a lot of the spiritual guy. He believed that the truth will set you free. My dad was a disabled veteran, and so he fought for rights, and he believed in the judicial system as it was laid out to us. And we didn't have the resources for a free world attorney, and so we had a court-appointed attorney, and my dad felt that he would do what was right by his calling. Needless to say, I stayed in the county jail 17 months. During the 17 months, I saw my court-appointed attorney about 4 times. He laid out all of the evidence. The evidence yielded the 10 witnesses. The description of the shooter was 6'2", 6'4". I'm 5'7", 5'8", brown skin, so I didn't fit the description. All of my alibis came to testify. There was no gun found. The fingerprints that was found at the scene of the crime were not mine. The guy that was shot that lived testified that I did not look like the shooter. But the one person testified against me, and the gunshot residue test came back positive in the palm of my right hand, but negative anywhere else. 6-day jury trial yielded to an 8-hour deliberation with a 60-year verdict from the jurors. It was 40 years for murder and 20 years for attempted murder. So at the age of 20, I was given 60 years for this crime that I had been wrongfully arrested for. And at that point in time, I literally I remember standing in the courtroom, and when they came back with the verdict, I sat down, and my lawyer kind of nudged me, and he asked me to stand up because I was supposed to respect the court. And just in my heart of hearts, Robert, I was like, how can you respect the entity that does not respect you? But for the position of being under authority, I think humility is one of the attributes that we as humans don't gravitate towards, but it is potentially the most powerful weapon that we have, just basically to be humble. And so I humbled myself, and I stood up, and I accepted the sentence that was handed down to me. And that night in visit, my family came to see me, and we put on the mask of everything would be all right. A month later, I would end up in the prison system. I did all of my time on Cofield Unit. Cofield Unit is it is the biggest prison in Texas. It houses over 5,000 men on this one unit. And when I say Richard Ray Miles Jr. died, it's totally in essence, because, when I went to prison, I was not allowed the opportunity to dream. When you're in prison, you are reduced from a human to a commodity. I was 72, 87, 16. The thought of wanting to be in plastics engineering was diverted, and I found myself working in the fields, trying to get out of the fields to get a better job. My experience in prison was very dehumanizing at times. And I felt every emotion under the book, from suicide. I wanted to kill myself at points in times because here I am, innocent. My mom and dad is spending all this money, and it just felt hopeless, But a couple of things that gave me the encouragement. A was my spiritual foundation. I'll go back to what my dad did when I was young. I did not understand the reasoning for church or believing in a spiritual being outside of you. But when I was in prison, Robert, the story of Joseph resonated so much with me. And I had read it over and over again. And to me as a kid, it was the same as Jack and the Beanstalk. It was just another literary piece of paper. But in prison, I kind of challenged the word. And I asked God, I said, God, if you're true, I want you to manifest yourself and cover me as I go through this. I didn't think God sent me to prison, but I know he covered me while I was in prison. So my faith was one thing. My family stayed with me. They supported me. They came to see me every month, made sure I had money on my books. They advocated on this side of the fence, writing letters and so forth. And one of the biggest things that helped me was my first day on Cofield Unit. They sent me to the barbershop to get my hair cut. And the guy that cut hair in the barbershop, his name is Benjamin Spencer. Benjamin Spencer, I talk about him everywhere I go. Benjamin Spencer is innocent. He's still incarcerated. He's been locked up over 30 years for a crime that he did not commit. And as he talked with me, I told him about my situation, and he gave me the address of Centurion Ministries, which is an innocence organization in Princeton, New Jersey, one of the only organizations that does non-DNA cases. And actually, John Grisham wrote his last book about Jim McCluskey, which is the founder of Centurion. I wrote Centurion in 1997, and eventually, after 10-year span, they accepted my case of actual innocence, and they began to work on it. In that 10 years, my direct appeal was denied, and I would meet a whole bunch of other innocent people on Cofield that would actually help me file my writ of habeas corpus that was denied. But that was pretty much of my journey internally inside of the prison system. 2007, Centurion took my case. 2009, I walked out of prison. The evidence that initially unlocked the door. Once I read my transcripts from Centurion Ministries, I opened up the police reports, and one of the first pieces of paper that I saw in the police reports, Robert, was a phone call that was made to the Dallas Police Department months before I went to trial. And it was a young lady who had been getting beat up by her boyfriend, and her boyfriend had actually told her about this crime and told her what type of gun he used, who he was with. This was never turned over in trial. I flipped through some more pages in the police reports, and apparently the victims had an assault charge on them. They had just beat up somebody and pulled a gun on them. This wasn't a part of the trial. There was so much evidence that was in the police records that was not open to trial that Brady violations was just overwhelming. And so with that, the door was unlocked and I walked out of prison in 2009, but I was not fully exonerated until 2012.
What took so long for the full exoneration?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is because my case now, it's ex parte Richard Miles, and my case is the first non-DNA, no confession. And basically what the Court of Criminal Appeals have to do is it's a Herculean task for a person to be proven actually innocent when you don't have DNA. And they had to really comb through my case. So my case stands on prosecutorial misconduct, faulty scientific evidence, and tainted identification. All of the evidence that I just spoke of falls up under the prosecutorial misconduct. The tainted identification goes towards the process that the police officers took when they arrested me. The faulty scientific evidence was the gunshot residue test that Swift did, and the lady testified that my hands were positive. Come to find out, we didn't have an expert witness at the point of trial. Centurion hired one. My hands were not positive for gunshot residue. She recanted her statement in 2010 and stated that if she was given another opportunity, she would not testify in the same manner as she did in 1994, 94, excuse me. Another piece of evidence was the gentleman that testified against me. He signed an affidavit after talking with the DA's office. This was the conviction integrity unit that District Attorney Craig Watkins had implemented. So they went and talked to the guy, and apparently the prosecutor showed him my pictures the day of trial because this gentleman was telling him that he could not truthfully identify me as the shooter. Keeping in mind my physical description did not ever fit it. The prosecutor told him that he showed my picture right before he went to trial, said, "This is Richard. This is who you picked out. When you go in here, I'm going to ask you who did the shooting. Just point towards the man sitting next to the lawyer." He did that. He signed an affidavit 15 years later stating that he did not or could not identify me as the shooter. And the only reason why he did was because the prosecutor coerced him to do it. So basically, the evidence that was withheld, the inappropriate and ineffective procedures by the prosecutor, and the false evidence was what yielded the full actual innocence release in 2012.
Wow, that's an incredible story, and so thankful that and you got out and got your full exoneration. And I know you're living a completely different life now, and it definitely took you down a different path and changed your focus on probably what you wanted to do with the rest of your life. But it sounds to me like I hear parts of your story are very similar to what you kind of see in the movie Just Mercy, which is the Equal Justice Initiative with Brian Stevenson, but also very similar to the Brian Banks story. The football player that also was wrongfully incarcerated, and you see some of that stuff that happens by the prosecution and some of the other things that you have to get time for someone to take that case, what's that one piece of evidence that gets them to say, there's your smoking gun that we feel we have a good chance of overturning this? And I guess you said that, and I guess correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounded like you kind of helped Centurion in that effort by going back through the transcripts and looking at the police records yourself and going through and identifying some of the things in there that were inconsistent that maybe led to your freedom. But now that you're out, what are you doing now? Because I know that your new effort and Miles of Freedom is you're trying to help others in similar situations. But not only that, once they're out, how do you help get them back on their feet? How do you help them find that same purpose in life again, like you have now, so that it can be more fulfilling once they're on the other side?
Yes. Yeah. So I've been doing Miles of Freedom, growing this organization with a great host of people for about 8 years now. And honestly, had I not went through what I went through, I don't think that I would be able to have the empathy to work with people that's been impacted by incarceration. And I think that's the tool that we need in this space. My dad passed 6 months before I got out. And one of the things that my dad did while I was incarcerated, we started a Bible study on Cofield Union. And so I was already placed as a servant type leader in prison. And while I found it ironic that I'm trying to usher someone to spiritual development, here I am struggling with my own. But I found a good friend, and he passed away a couple of years ago, but we noticed this revolving door of people, getting out and coming back to the same unit. And the thing that they would say is there are not a lot of resources out when we get out. And I noticed the lack of resources in the prison system. And I grew up with these men. When my dad passed, these are the men's shoulders that I cried on. And so walking out of prison, if you can imagine going in at 19 and coming out at 34, when I went to prison, beepers had just came out and iPhones was everywhere. It was no such thing as a train line. It was just buses. I hadn't seen my family in years. And so that burden of reentry, it's very overwhelming. And then to layer that on top of being wrongfully incarcerated, it's a struggle to want to embrace the system that we call justice when you have not been truly given or afforded justice. But in my transition, I think God just continuously dealt with me. I was able to transition through the help of my mom, people at my church. And so when I was fully exonerated in 2012, we had lobbied for exonerees to get compensated in Texas, and we were able to get that done through the Tim Cole Act. And so I was financially compensated, but the money came from a dark place. It came from a wrongful incarceration. It came by way of a death for my dad and so many other family members. So to me, the money really didn't matter. But how could we make this money be more impactful? And so the idea of Miles of Freedom manifesting came from that money. And I wanted to make sure that nobody got out of prison the same way that I did. True, there are some services out here, but a lot of them really don't know the weight of reentry. Mm-hmm. A lot of them don't know the lack of resources within prisons. And so it has to be a new way that we think about reentry. And so this is what we've been doing for 8 years. About 1,500 people served, a little bit over 1,500 people served, 7% recidivism. We have a shuttle service that takes families to visit their loved ones incarcerated. That's been kind of on hold for COVID. We do a fresh produce distribution where it's been about a year now, a little bit over 430,000 pounds of produce distributed to Dallas citizens. So our biggest thing is just to change the narrative and perception of people impacted by incarceration by giving them a platform to be the successful people that we know that they can be.
That's absolutely incredible. And to think about, unfortunately, I wish you didn't have the experience to know what needed to be done to get people back in. But the fact that you're leveraging the opportunity that was given to you to focus on that to help others is truly inspiring, and just grateful to hear what you're doing, the different ways that you're trying to bring hope to people, but then also help them with their reentry process. And you talk about that change, what needs to happen, and you think about what's going on in our country right now, with the protests and the movements that we're seeing across the country, that a lot of that is kind of on the front end stuff. And what's getting lost is probably your piece of it, is what are we doing to not only provide resources while people are in there, to provide an opportunity to give them a path forward once they get out, but what resources and opportunities are there even for individuals when they get out. And so when you think about what's kind of happening right now, what is, some of the change that you're wanting to see? What do you think about everything and where it's kind of moving in the climate in our country?
Yeah. So we are most definitely living in a totally different time frame right now. I spiritually look at this time frame as like either the last, it's like the birth, it's the birth of a new type of mindset. And we have to be very cautious in this birth process to make sure that what is needed is provided, and understanding the cries of the people that are crying from a criminal justice standpoint, or from the standpoint of the police situations. The first thing that I would like people to understand is the criminal justice system is so complicated. When you talk about criminal justice reform, what level of reform are you talking about? Are you referring to the initial interactions between the police officer? Are you referring to the proper procedures between the interrogation or the trial procedure? I think that we as a nation, or we as individuals, we don't fully understand the complexities of the issues that have caused oppression. And so when we scream out, we just scream out in frustration, but not really understanding. We have to break this down. We can't eat this as an elephant. And on the other side of the table, I think that people, we need to create spaces of empathy. There is a population of people that they're not willing to empathize because they feel like that everybody has been afforded the right or equal resources. But equal doesn't always mean equitable. And I think that that's something that we have to embrace. While we may all have equal rights and equal resources, are they equitable? And if they're truly not, then from a humanitarian standpoint, what can we do? Get away from race, get away from income, get away from just you being human, and I see another human hurt. What does that require me to do? That's the core of where we are right now, from everything that we're dealing with.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up the point that what piece of this do you want to attack, because there's probably so much reform that needs to happen, and it's great to see, like you're saying, just a birth and a kind of a reckoning, so to say, of people saying, hey, we need change and it needs to look like this. And even in our community, I mean, we're having conversations about different pieces of it that probably didn't even think about, like what a lot of people are, what's going on with bail reform and allowing people an opportunity to get out and move around. And, but then you start dealing with the mental health and domestic violence and sexual assault pieces of this. And what does that need to look like? Because, it's hard. And I think of what, Chief Brown from Dallas, the previous chief, said, is that so many people expect police officers to be everything to everyone. And that's just an unreasonable ask. And how do you kind of help, individuals, if you're going to pick a place to start, let's start here, like you said, and you can't just eat the elephant. You got to take it off bite by bite to make progress. And even slow progress is progress, and allows you to make changes. But do you think that the focus of some of the movement has been in the right place? And by that, I mean, there's a lot of talk across the country about defunding, polices, which, I think is truly just a complete misnomer of what they're actually meaning. It's not to fully defund the police, but it's more about providing additional departments or demilitarization or enhancing programming that help the officers do their job, but also provide better service and care and protection for different individuals under different circumstances. And, what's kind of your thought on the focus? And like you said, if we weren't going to just eat the elephant all at once, what's kind of a place to start in your mind to start to see that change that we need to see across the country?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And I'll say that referring to the defund the police, I think the first thing is to understand what that means. It's one thing to come up with this saying that's strong and provocative, but if people are not on the same page with the definition of it, then you're going to cause more confusion than you could cause collective behavior. I think that a lot of people do not understand what defund the police, as you was breaking it down. And I think that when that narrative comes out, right behind the narrative should come some very precise things that weigh in on what defund the police means, particularly to where we are right now when you're looking at the Black Lives Matter movement and the police brutality. I think really addressing the behaviors of our police officers, and truthfully, Robert, it goes beyond the lives that are lost in custody of police officers, because I'm a victim of the police brutality from a concept of them not truthfully pulling in the evidence right. I lost 15 years. I was blessed not to lose my life on the field, but just those inappropriate moves, whether it was late at night and they didn't want to do a full investigation. Once the police put the handcuffs on you, you're guilty. I'm doing a seminar next week. I'm doing a thing next week with this museum. It's entitled Guilty Until Proven Innocent. When a Black person, when a minority, when the handcuffs are put on, we're automatically guilty. And so police officers have to make sure that we are arresting the right people. And they also have to make sure that every person is afforded due process. That's what we're missing. And that's what's so frustrating about this movement. We have, as a country, set up the right that every person is afforded due process. There was a crime committed. We have a suspect. This suspect is arrested. That officers are not allowing citizens to appreciate due process. I never thought in a million years that I would be thankful for a wrongful incarceration. But when I look at the Mr. Floyds, when I look at the Tamir Braxton, when I look at all these individuals whose lives was lost and mine made it through, wrongful incarceration, it was hurtful, but I still have a voice to fight. So I think that making sure that our officers, Black, white, Hispanic, making sure that they are not any type of extremist against any other ethnicity, whatever type of test the police officers have to implement to make sure that these people, we all have biases, I know, and prejudices, I know, but when those things evolve into hate, we have to do something about that. The other thing is the professionalism. We got away from apprehending and now we're just killing. Can we get back to the apprehension of the suspect and not to kill the suspect? Those are two things that, if done and if articulated to the community, I think that the community would consider those as progressive movements and tangible things that will at least say we hear you instead of saying keep screaming and we're going to keep doing what we're going to do.
Yeah, and I think those are all valid points. And even in our community, like, we're having conversations. We have a task force that's kind of community led. A lot of community members from all over the spectrum that are engaging in conversation with our police officers about, and our police department, about what changes we as a community want to see. Because every community in North Texas has different demographics. They have different problems. They have different things that they are working on to try to address. And one of the things that we're working on here is, how do we get outreach to our Hispanic community? How do we look at potentially hiring, and incentivizing more bilingual officers, so that translation is not a problem with a community that's grown almost 50% in the last 5 years. We're having more challenges with the number of people in our community and the different ways that we need to provide our policing and public safety for our community. And it's interesting because on some level, and I'm sure you do too, based on what I've heard in previous discussions, fully support our officers and what they're trying to do. But when you try to have a conversation, and a hard conversation, about moving forward, a lot of people are going to label you and think that you're what are you trying to do? And change is hard, and we don't want to see change, and what you're doing is wrong. But as we kind of both know, you at least have to have a conversation about it and have an understanding of where can we go to get better. But one question I want to ask is, are you able to support the police, support kind of Black Lives Matter movement, and support change for everyone, that we're moving forward together? Because right now it seems like you are not allowed to have those spheres kind of collide and come together and be one. But what are your thoughts on being able to support all of those at the same time, to make sure that we are truly in the process of engaging in a progressive movement that is going to lead towards positive change that hopefully everyone can kind of get around?
Yeah, so I'm totally for, and I know it's possible to have an appreciation for those that are in position of authority, as far as law enforcement, as far as attorneys. I understand that there is there is a need for that. I also understand that there is a need for the conversation for the treatment of the Black American experience in general, and just minorities in general. I think that those conversations are possible, but this goes back to humility. One of the things that when people ask me how did I make it in prison, I tell them that there is a peace in being innocent. There is peace in being innocent, and there is peace when you're innocent and you're changing, you're evolving. Our officers that are here to protect us, if they are innocent of any type of allegations, be it hatred, if you're innocent of that, then rely on that and understand that we are at a point of change. We are not dealing with an isolated incident. We're dealing with a compilation of years and years and years. And I think the issue is, everybody is saying it's not my problem because I did not do this. Well, it's not my problem because I did not do it. Well, it's somebody's responsibility now. It may not be your problem because you did not initiate it, but it's our responsibility to make sure that our children are not dealing with the same stuff that we're dealing with right now. If that's what type of people at the end of the day that we have become, that we are so saturated in ourselves that I don't want to talk about the hatred, the animosity, the guilt, because I want to keep that and I'll let my children talk about it. As I said on Facebook, shame on us. I think that we have the tools right now to have these conversations, to push this needle forward, and to be the collective group of creative individuals that God created us to be.
I 100% agree. And that's kind of, before I kind of weighed in on some of this, when it all kind of started, it was, I wanted to listen first. I wanted to see. I didn't want to just make some blanket innocuous statement that, was just kind of hollow words that every other person was saying, and truly look and listen to what are some of the themes? What are we looking to accomplish? What's realistic, so that we can have those conversations, because you have to listen to individuals and educate yourself with a mindset that you're hopeful that you can evolve your own thinking. Because if you're not willing to evolve your own thinking, if you're not willing to look towards, is there a better way to do this, something that is better for the collective, then we're never going to change. We're just going to be stuck in our old ways. And I think most people have that mindset where they are thinking, okay, how can we do this? And I think it's great that so many people are having this conversation, because, I was inspired. And when we met, we were at the Carrollton Police Department speaking. You were sharing the same story that you shared kind of at the beginning of the segment. And I know from speaking to Aaron and from speaking to Chief Miller that you oftentimes go back to the police station and speak to the new and young officers. And kind of what has been your take from that in terms of, how has that been going, and what have you seen from that brings in terms of the young officers? Are they finding help? Have they reached back out to you, a few years after to just kind of converse and say, appreciate what was said, or this is how what you said to me helped me? And I would love to know, if that's actually been the case, given that I know that you do that.
You know what, honestly, so what I'll say is, in just rooms altogether, Robert, you're going to run into the people that will always question my innocence or question a person's innocence. And it's because the judicial system and society is in this marriage, and we've been married since the systems of correction was put in place, and we hold these systems and people to be perfect. And when something happens that challenges that perfect union, some people would rather stay in the volatile relationship than address the imperfections of the relationship. And so when I'm talking with, different groups, police officers, you can see in a person's eyes, that's one thing prison does. And I think we can take advantage of that now, being in shelter in place. You can really, a person's eyes tells you a lot about them, and you can know a lot about a person. I've said it, I've spoken with people, and you can walk out and say, yep, they really didn't get it. In some rooms, I'm called back, such as Carrollton, Chief Miller, and now you, Erin always screams, and when she screams, I come running, So my biggest thing is everybody won't get it, but then again, everybody may not get it. And it's for those people that do get it, that the doors are staying open, and I'm able to now speak on this platform with you. For me personally, when I speak, it's therapeutic. It's also hurtful, because every time I speak, another door opens up that I kind of closed up. But at the end of the day, it gives me purpose for my pain. Nothing I could be doing right now could give me purpose for my pain, other than talking with officers, talking with people, and doing miles of freedom and trying to live my best life with my family.
Yeah, and you've done an amazing job at that. And I've been kind of, as I keep reiterating, just truly impressed and inspired. But, kind of getting down to just, I think, one kind of final question, and then I have a few quick rapid fire questions for you that just going to hit you with some quick ones, just to get your thoughts on it, maybe learn a little bit more about you as well. But, what success stories have you seen from, the very beginning until now, and where have you seen that growth? What positive change have you seen since you've started having these conversations and working with different groups to find a path forward?
Yeah. So when I think about success stories, I can start with Aubry Jones. So Aubry Jones is the older guy that I started the vision of Miles of Freedom with while I was incarcerated. We transitioned, he gets out, he was incarcerated as well. We get out, we start this organization, and Mr. Jones passes. Well, his son now is one of the main persons on our lawn service to help cultivate and grow that. And when you can leave something like that for your child or for your family, to me, that's a legacy. It may be a small lawn service, but it's an opportunity that his dad started and that's sustainable now, and that his son is a beneficiary of some work that he saw. Um, Over 1,500 people that we've worked with, we've seen some ups and downs. I won't say that every story was a great story. You know, one of my biggest challenges was a lady brought her son in and he was dealing with mental issues, right? And he was working around the office and everything. And a couple of days later, he said he was good. He didn't want to come in anymore to do the case management. And he stayed around about a week, 2 weeks. Come to find out, he went downtown and jumped off a bridge. Um, and what that showed me, Robert, was people impacted by incarceration, or people in general, we have way more issues. And when people come in our doors, we have to take that as this could be this person's last time. It doesn't matter if you're in social service or if you're a police officer. I think that's, it hit me there. It got real. It wasn't just getting a job. It's this person needs help. That's why they're here. And so I think from a mindset of success, that showed me to be more conscious of people when they come for help, and not to just box everybody in. You need a resume. You need a bus ticket. No, some people just need to sit down and talk more. And so growing forward, last year was a great year for Miles of Freedom. I was nominated for CNN Top 10 Heroes. That's my kind of award in the back there. That brought along some great financial support. We were identified as Oryx Foundation for financial support. So this year, we are continuing with our case management services. We're still essential. We are an essential service during the time of COVID, which is a blessing to even be moving. 4 or 5 years from now, I hope that we have our own physical location. The idea is to have case managers in different communities that's impacted by incarceration, but still providing that care that we know people need impacted by incarceration.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're, taking on the endeavor of tackling that piece of the area that it needs some help and hasn't always been paid attention to. But hopefully, the more you share your stories, the more you win one of 4 awards like you did with CNN Heroes, the more you can get your message out there and the change that you're trying to see. I think the better we're going to be in the long run in terms of taking care of people and trying to create that change that will evolve us as a country to a much brighter future that we all deserve. And so just want to thank you for that work that you're doing and for sharing your story. But, with a few just quick questions, what's the biggest change in American culture that you've seen from when you were 19 until now?
Well, obviously the biggest change is technology. Mm-hmm. Technology, oh my God. I mean, when I went to prison, it was, I think I just had got Atari or something. No, I think, Street Fighter. No, Street Fighter was like the end thing, and it was like the original one. So technology has morphed so much. And it's our own culture. I think that's something that we miss. I think we're missing the fact that technology is a culture that's actually taken over our everyday culture. And we're kind of conforming to this culture of technology.
Yeah, we oftentimes take it for granted and don't realize how far we've actually come because we use it every single day while it's taken leaps and bounds. It seems like it's just been, normal. I mean, I remember growing up where, I had to put a CD in the computer to get online, and now it's just ubiquitous. So, but what's your favorite thing to do with your family and then in your spare time?
So favorite thing to do with my family is just play with my little girls, just enjoying them. My daughter, Raylan, she's 5 now. So playing with all of her toys, I got to be every different character that she has. So that takes time, being all the Paw Patrols and all of that. For my own self-time, I'm still athletic, so I like jogging.
Okay.
I like exercise, and I think that really it's like a stress relief for me. And then when the COVID kind of ramped up, and they was talking about this is a respiratory thing, I kind of focused a lot more on things that would beef up my respiratory system. So jogging is what I do and exercising for my spare time.
Cool. And then one interesting fact that people don't know about you.
One interesting fact.
I mean, you have a million, but I guess your favorite one.
One interesting fact. I've read almost every book by John Grisham, and when I met him in Princeton, New Jersey, I was flabbergasted. I didn't even know what to say to it. But just to meet a person who you follow so much literary wise, and then to meet him in person, I'm like, wow. So interesting.
It's completely starstruck. That's amazing. You're amazing. Just want to thank you for your perseverance. I want to thank you for your humility. I want to thank you for your compassion and your drive and purpose for what you're trying to do now, because I know the hope for all of us is to find a path that leads to a better future for everyone. But first, we have to talk with each other. So I just want to thank you for talking with me today. You know, we have to be willing to listen, and we have to educate each other, and only then can we truly move forward towards a brighter future. And so, you know, I'm wishing you all the best in your endeavors and what you're trying to do. And, you know, hopefully we look up in 5 to 10 years and it's a completely different world like you've experienced once before, but, you know, in a much more positive way. But just want to thank you for being here and for spending your morning with me, for sure.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. Thank Aaron for connecting us. Appreciate this opportunity and this platform. Thank you.
I do want to just say, you know, thanks for everyone for watching Mornings with the Mayor. Again, I'm Mayor Robert Dye. We're doing our best to keep you updated, keep you informed, and keep you thinking about how we're moving our community forward. And with cases ramping back up, just want to remind everyone, be safe, be a little distant, be smart. And until next time, we'll see you then. Thanks.